Richard Blackwood stood before his bathroom mirror at 5:30 in the morning, his reflection showing a man who controlled billions but couldn't control his daughter's heart. The mahogany-paneled walls of his penthouse seemed to mock him as he reached for the tattered clothes he'd purchased from a thrift store the previous evening. His daughter Isabella's words from dinner still echoed in his mind. "I'll never marry, Papa. How can I trust that someone loves me for who I am and not for what I have?" At 28, Isabella had built walls higher than the skyscrapers surrounding their luxury apartment. She was brilliant, successful, and achingly lonely. Richard watched her reject suitor after suitor, each one seemingly more interested in the Blackwood fortune than in his precious daughter's heart. The irony wasn't lost on him. His wealth, meant to provide security and happiness, had become her prison. Richard smeared dirt across his weathered face, his manicured hands now hidden beneath fingerless gloves. The transformation was startling. The man who commanded boardrooms and influenced city policy now looked like someone society would cross the street to avoid. He tucked a small flask of cheap whiskey into his coat pocket, not to drink, but to complete the illusion. His plan was elegantly simple. Position himself outside the courthouse where ambitious young professionals gathered, observe their character when they thought no one important was watching, and find someone worthy of Isabella's guarded heart. The morning air bit through his thin jacket as Richard settled onto the cold concrete steps of the courthouse. His expensive car was parked 3 blocks away, and his driver had strict instructions not to approach unless summoned. For the first time in decades, Richard was truly alone, invisible to the world that usually bent to accommodate his every wish. The first wave of lawyers, accountants, and consultants rushed past him like a river around a stone. Designer shoes clicked against pavement mere inches from where he sat, their owners' eyes fixed on phones or straight ahead, anywhere but on the human being crumpled before them. A few dropped coins without breaking stride, their charity as impersonal as a vending machine transaction. Richard's heart sank as he watched Isabella's peers, educated, successful, well-dressed, demonstrate a casual indifference to human suffering that made his stomach turn. "Disgusting," muttered a young man in an expensive suit, stepping elaborately around Richard. "Someone should clean up this trash." Richard's hands clenched into fists before he remembered his role. He was here to observe, to learn, to find hope in a world that seemed increasingly devoid of genuine compassion. The morning dragged on, each interaction confirming his worst fears about the kind of men who moved in Isabella's social circles. By noon, Richard had collected $43 in scattered change and lost considerable faith in humanity. The sun climbed higher, and his bones ached from the hard concrete. This wasn't just about finding Isabella a husband anymore. It was about understanding whether kindness still existed in their polished, professional world. Then the afternoon shift began, and with it came a different energy. These were the public defenders, the social workers, the community organizers, people who'd chosen service over profit. Richard straightened slightly, hope flickering in his chest like a candle in the wind. A young woman stopped and knelt beside him, her eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Are you okay, sir? Do you need medical attention?" Her concern was genuine, her voice free of the condescension he'd heard all morning. She pressed a business card into his palm, along with a $20 bill. "There's a shelter coordinator's number on there. They have warm meals and clean beds." Richard nodded gratefully, studying her face. She was lovely, but more importantly, she was decent. Could she be right for Isabella? Then he remembered his daughter's preferences. Isabella had always been drawn to confidence, to quiet strength, to men who could match her intellectual intensity. This woman, though wonderful, wouldn't capture Isabella's particular brand of guarded romantic interest. As the day wound down, Richard felt the weight of failure settling over him like the evening shadows. Perhaps his plan was naive. Perhaps genuine goodness was too rare to find through such a random search. He was preparing to abandon his post when the first drops of rain began to fall, and with them, everything changed. The courthouse steps emptied quickly as professionals scurried toward covered parking and warm cars. Richard pulled his thin jacket tighter, rainwater beginning to soak through the inadequate fabric. The cold seeped into his bones, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be vulnerable, to be forgotten, to be disposable in society's eyes. In the rain outside a courthouse, a young man with soaked hair and a warm gaze approaches an elderly homeless man. He gently drapes his jacket over the man's shoulders, the fabric still steaming with body heat. David, standing close, offers a $20 bill and speaks softly, his hand briefly pressing Richard's in a gesture filled with empathy. The moment captures true kindness, crossing class and social lines under a gray, rainy sky. Richard sits stunned beneath the rain, watching David disappear into the distance, his heart heavy with something new: hope. The contrast between his soaked form and David's disappearing figure feels symbolic and deeply human. The next morning, Richard sits again on the courthouse steps, now alert and expectant. A figure approaches, David, holding a hot cup of coffee and a bakery bag, settling beside him without drama. The two men sit side by side, steam rising from the coffee as David smiles and introduces himself. Richard, now Robert, sips quietly, the expression on his face softening for the first time in days. A series of morning scenes, David sharing breakfast, laughing gently, talking about justice and life. They sit close on the courthouse steps, deep in authentic conversation while the world passes by unnoticed. David, animated and thoughtful, shares stories about his grandmother who raised him, cleaning office buildings for decades. He breaks a bagel in half and hands it to Richard, quoting her wisdom about character over money. Richard hides teary eyes behind greasy, unkempt hair, deeply moved as he listens to David's simple, powerful truths. In this image, he looks not like a billionaire, but like a soul reawakened by compassion. On a stormy day, Richard pretends to collapse, lying curled and clutching his chest on the courthouse steps. Passers-by hurry past him, some filming with their phones, others ignoring him completely. David arrives to a small crowd, immediately kneels beside the collapsed Richard, checking for a pulse and calling for help with urgent calm. Raindrops run down his face, but he's entirely focused on the man before him. In a stock hospital waiting room, David sits in a plastic chair, checking his watch, but refusing to leave. The doctor finally appears, and David walks to the desk, offering his credit card without hesitation. Inside a hospital room, Richard lies in bed, emotionally overwhelmed as David leans beside him. His face is filled with disbelief and gratitude, while David simply shrugs off the act as something natural and necessary. David responds sincerely to Richard's whispered question, his eyes steady and kind. The setting is quiet, sterile, but the connection between the two men pulses with real emotional weight. David's life, spending long office hours, worn briefcase, home-packed lunch shared with Richard, and his conversations full of dreams about justice, not money. Richard watches all this, listening more closely each day. Richard sits at his desk at night, studying documents and photos, orchestrating a carefully staged legal referral that will bring David and Isabella into the same room. The wheels of his final plan begin turning in secret. From the courthouse steps, Richard watches David helping other homeless people, offering socks, sharing food, offering smiles, with the same consistent compassion. In the fading light, Richard sits quietly, deeply changed, reflecting on a kind of wealth money could never buy. A modest law office in an older downtown building with Isabella, a confident, stylish young black woman in a chic navy pantsuit entering the room, looking slightly curious. She stands tall, her straightened hair framing her face as she glances at her watch. 15 minutes early. Inside a modest conference room, David enters, his suit clean but budget, carrying a slightly worn briefcase. Isabella, caught off guard by the warmth in his smile and the sincerity in his handshake, subtly leans forward in interest. David smiles earnestly across the conference table, referencing a document on zoning laws while speaking with calm confidence. Isabella, pen in hand, looks genuinely engaged and unexpectedly charmed. A cozy, family-run Vietnamese restaurant in an older neighborhood with David and Isabella seated at a small corner table. The steam from bowls of pho rises as the owners greet David like family, and Isabella looks charmed by the intimacy of the space. Over dinner, Isabella smiles awkwardly, pausing as she says, "I don't usually date in my professional circle," while David laughs gently, misinterpreting her meaning. The candlelit table between them reflects an atmosphere of growing mutual curiosity. David and Isabella on various simple dates. A picnic in the park, watching community theater, exploring vibrant local art galleries. She wears more relaxed, casual attire, and he's seen in his usual modest suit or button-downs, both smiling freely. Richard, disguised as Robert, sits on the courthouse steps in his tattered clothes and knit cap, watching from afar. David offers him a coffee and a bag of breakfast food with his usual warm smile before rushing off to work, unaware of the hidden observer's true identity. In the morning cold, David kneels beside Robert with a joyful expression, his hands animated as he talks about Isabella. The elder man listens intently, trying to hide the swell of emotion behind his worn gloves. A close-up of Richard's face as he asks David, "What makes you so sure she'll say yes?" His eyes are searching, misted with anticipation, while David beams with quiet certainty. David's joyful expression is lit with a quiet glow as he describes how Isabella laughs with him and finds joy in simple things. Rain patters softly in the background as they sit under the courthouse awning, sharing this personal moment. Inside the luxurious Blackwood apartment, Isabella stands in shocked silence, her hand over her mouth as Richard reveals the truth. He stands in a tailored suit now, shedding his disguise as he explains everything with a calm but emotional voice. Isabella, teary-eyed but smiling through disbelief, listens as her father tells her that David never once asked about money or status. The lighting is warm, intimate, with a visible shift in her perception of both men in her life. David kneels with a small modest ring in hand in a quiet park. Isabella, stunned and teary, covers her mouth in surprise before nodding and embracing him with overwhelming joy. In the same park, Isabella gently explains her family background and wealth as David, wide-eyed, processes the revelation. Then he laughs, embracing her again and whispering reassurance as he holds her hand. A lavish, private dining room set for an engagement dinner. David, now in a clean suit, gasps as he recognizes Richard in his full billionaire glory. The elder man smiles, arms wide open for a hug. Richard embraces David with genuine pride, telling him that he's cared for his future father-in-law all along. David's face is stunned with realization, then breaks into a smile as he's welcomed into the family. A joyful wedding in an elegant garden, with David and Isabella holding hands before a diverse, supportive crowd. Richard stands beside them in a proud father of the bride role, surrounded by warmth and authenticity. In a heartfelt moment at the wedding reception, Richard gives his speech, holding a glass of champagne as he speaks of character and love. Guests listen with emotion, and the couple holds hands at their table, visibly moved. Months later, Isabella and David work together at a legal aid clinic, meeting clients in a modest office filled with warmth. Richard joins them occasionally, no longer in disguise, sharing coffee and laughter with those they serve. David helping a client, Isabella drafting designs, the couple walking hand in hand, and Richard smiling quietly at their success. A final message overlays the whole story. Real wealth is compassion. Real love is character.